Welcome everyone. Welcome to Tech Talk Asia, Tech Talk Friday. And every Friday we talk technology, we talk what's happening in the world. And today we have the honor, the privilege of a very interesting guest who goes by the name of Data. Data, welcome to the show, and so glad to have you with us. And we were just talking a little bit about culture, and I know you've lived in a number of countries. You've done some amazing stuff. You're also prominent in the cybersecurity space. I think you've done quite a bit of work in the cybersecurity space, and we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity. Data's currently the Cybersecurity Director at USGI. Data, maybe very quickly, you can introduce yourself to us.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Gwyddon, and that's a Welsh name, so it's difficult to say and even harder to spell. And as an Air Force, a retired Air Force officer, the Air Force loves its nicknames. So Data was assigned many years ago. As I said, Air Force. So I came from the Air Force Academy and went into cyber warfare. And I've got a master's from the Air Force Institute of Technology. I'm a computer network operations development program, which is a joint NSA and US Cyber Command venture. I'm qualified on all the work roles for things like the NSA Red Team, as well as the ROC, and all 6 offensive work roles for US Cyber Command. I've done red teaming penetration testing and other things against targets in air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace domains. And I've done it for the US, the UK, with the Australians, the Canadians, and New Zealand as well. So,
Wow, I mean, that's amazing, and I think there's going to be lots of stories, lots of things we can talk a little bit about. But I think jumping right into the cybersecurity pieces. I mean, there's a lot of new attack vectors and techniques. I mean, cyber criminals are getting smarter, savvier, and I think you being a hacker and also somewhat working on the security part. What are some of the things that are happening in the space? How is that evolving, and what do you see that you can enlighten us? Especially I think you see it at the front end. Especially with governments and so on and so forth. What are some of those things that you see?
so what's interesting is someone put forward the idea that everything is a remix, and really, at the end of the day, it's the same stuff, just kind of done different ways. So, for instance, social engineering attacks. You look at it, and without bringing any specific like religion stuff into it, you can say, look, if you take the biblical account of the creation of the earth, the whole like forbidden fruit thing, that was a social engineering attack. So that it's not like that's new, right?
Right.
Um, and it's just done through a different domain, or done with a different way, or done with different techniques. But at the end of the day, it's social engineering is still social engineering. And as the technology gets better, social engineering becomes more prevalent because it is the weakest link in the chain.
And what are some examples? I mean, of this. I mean, that's happening. I think one of the things is that for us, ignorance is bliss, right? When we are unaware of stuff, so like, oh, life is good. But then you hear stuff. I mean, like recently in Indonesia, right? There was this huge attack where the entire airport and I guess the government was sieged, and obviously at the end of the day they released it and gave them the key and said, hey, you got to up your security. What does this all mean? I mean, it's for the layman, it seems very confusing.
So with the airport specifically, or something else?
I mean, general, right? I mean, what are some of the things that you're seeing that we need to be aware of, and unique things that you're seeing?
So there are a couple of things, right? So uh, some of the more interesting things that are out there are the different tactics and
Mm.
techniques that are being used. So one of the big things out there today is AI everything, right? And they're like, oh, I'm going to put AI in your phone, or I'm going to put AI on like a Copilot Plus laptop and stuff like that. And you go, cool, what's it actually going to do for me? And in a lot of cases, the answer is eat up your battery power. So I mean, that's kind of a feature. There are other things that it can do that are um, more worrisome.
Mm.
So case in point, um, when it comes to social engineering, taking a large language model, if I take
Mm.
one of those that's been trained on some open source, then I refine it by pointing it at, say, your social media accounts and your organization's public facing information. If I let it loose on all of that stuff, then as it explores your social networks, there are a number of things that it can do. First up, voice cloning is absolutely a thing. Second thing is that facial cloning is absolutely a thing. And so if I were a bad guy and I wanted to get my social engineer on, I wouldn't work on we've all seen those like Nigerian prince emails, right? That are clearly phishing, and you go, "What? Come on, really? Who's going to fall for that?" Thing is that a well done phishing attack is much different, and AI obviously is good at doing writing, so letting it write your phishing emails for you, but targeting it specifically to your victim, like the level of attention and detail that you'd normally put in on a whaling email or attack of some kind can be put in by an AI on every single person's thing. So you can do it at scale and you can do it at speed, and you can make it very, very tailored to that individual. And if you happen to have compromised an account of one of the friends or business partners or whatever of your victim, then you can have it coming from a legitimate source, having it sound like the person that they've compromised, asking them to do something that is more or less in line with something that person would ask them to do. So it's less about does the AI pass the Turing test, but do the people pass the phishing test?
Yeah, that's true. And you know, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say it's not just about the phishing, right? Because there's a ton of other ways that you can attack. You can do it with smishing and vishing and all that sort of stuff, right? There's a bunch of different vectors. They're all essentially the same thing. I'm trying to convince you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do, and is generally not in your best interest. So mixing that with the two big things that you do when you go phishing, right? And I use phishing as that cover term. When you do social engineering, you want to get people to lower their guard because you're putting pressure on them to act in a certain way. And generally that's going to come from two main motivations. Either you're going to attack their heart or you're going to attack their wallet. Ideally, you'll do both. So if it's, poor, starving orphan puppies, and they need donations now or something like that, right? It's going to tug on both of those. Or if you don't donate to the poor, starving orphan puppies, then the government's going to fine you or something ridiculous like that.
Right. And so how do you defend against these things, right? I mean, a lot of attackers are exploiting third-party vendors, and I mean, we've seen the recent attacks, a couple of them. How does one prepare for this, and how does one, especially in this phishing scenario? I mean, it's your users or the folks around you that enable those holes to be opened in your network to these criminals, right?
Sure. So, couple of things there. One, how do you defend against things like the social engineering that we just discussed? The best way is that be suspicious. And so there's a phrase that gets tossed around here in the US of trust but verify. And so let's say you gave me a call, or I got a call that says Roshan is calling you. Cool. I pick it up. It sounds like Roshan. It has the speech patterns. It's got the voice. It's coming from the right number. So all that checks out. But you're asking me to do something that's a little weird. So I'd be like, okay, cool. Hang on. You know what? Let me call you back. And if I call you back and you go, and the real you says, I did not call you, then obviously something's up. Because at the end of the day, I know that everybody thinks that the entire cyber community thinks that the attacker has the advantage. That's a lie. The defenders have the advantage. The defenders have every advantage except for one. And it is the defender's job not to be right all the time, because the mantra is the defender has to be right every time, the attacker has to be right once. That's not true. At the end of the day, what has to happen is the attacker has to be right every time and not get caught every time. Because you know it as well as I do, as soon as you find something weird in the network and you know for realsies that you're being attacked, man, the shields go up, and
Yeah.
the attacker's job gets much, much harder. So instead, it's the defender's job not to be right every time, but to have defense in sufficient depth and to shape their own network environment such that the attacker is forced to self-identify.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
if I have traffic that only goes certain ways during certain periods of the day, can an attacker emulate it? Sure, with enough intelligence, but most attackers are not going to invest that level of effort. They're going to get in, they're going to do smash and grab, and probably encrypt on the way out, right? Because ransomware is a thing. But if I'm disallowing peer-to-peer communication, if I'm implementing the principle of least privilege digitally, as opposed to just saying, hey, don't do that, then no matter what the individual has or the attacker has managed to collect along the way, as far as credentials goes, they're still going to be limited. You asked about supply chain stuff, and you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. The more global we get, the longer the supply chains are going to get, which is why, like I said, trust but verify is the approach I'd recommend. Because in some cases, attackers are going to go after links that are 3, 6, 12 links back from wherever someone's assembling or building or whatever something. But while doing this digitally, like changing, like changing a design in a chip fab plant is new or newish. This sort of thing is totally not new at all, right? I mean, we've all heard of cyber attacks that have had supply chain elements, like NotPetya.
Yeah.
That happened because of supply chain stuff. You look at SolarWinds, XZ almost did it, but some people don't know that, like in World War II, the Germans tried to destabilize the UK's economy by flooding it with counterfeit currency. That's a supply chain thing.
Yeah.
In 1982, Tylenol's products got tampered with on store shelves, and a lot of people got poisoned. That's why we have anti-tamper stuff on our stuff now, right? In 2007, there are a bunch of pet foods that had melamine and cyanic acid introduced into them, which caused kidney failure in a bunch of cats and dogs across many continents. So supply chain shenanigans is not new. It's just a new domain. And so really what it comes down to is the same way you protect against a buffer overflow. You do input validation. Defend against what you're taking in. I mean, grab a graduate of a high school stats class, for crying out loud. Have them help you sample a sufficient number of the widgets that you're taking in so you're comfortable with your level of confidence in the ones that you didn't sample. Because, I mean, you think about it, right? If I'm going to make sure that all the ice cream that's going through is good, personally, I'm going to have to eat all the ice cream in order to make sure it's all good. But that doesn't leave me with a whole lot left to sell.
Right.
So you're going to have to do it with sampling.
Yeah. But, it's become a little bit more complicated with AI, right? I mean, part of what the criminals are doing is using AI to be consistently, pinging, knocking, sort of trying to find ways and holes in there. As in terms of defending, right, it becomes tiresome. I know we can talk a little bit about, okay, we need to put in sampling and so on. How do you counter this with attackers using AI, machine learning, and these automated attacks that are happening? I mean, outside of the DDoS stuff, I mean, the stuff that is being threatening to us. What are you seeing in terms of the defense side of things?
Sure. I mean, you think about it, right? So let's just assume that we're talking about the criminal element, right? Really, what it is, that's their job, and everyone wants to make their job more efficient. And I'm sure you've heard of the 8 funnel when it comes to completing tasks, right? And for some of your viewers that might not have heard of it, there's a funnel of stuff. When a task comes into your inbox, be it physical or otherwise, there's a funnel of decisions that you can make on how you get this task done. And here's how you protect your time, because that's the one thing you can't get more of. So you can delegate the thing that comes in, you can automate the thing that comes in, you can eliminate the thing that comes in, or you can procrastinate the thing that comes in. All of those are okay. And if none of them, if you can't use any of those, then finally you just do the thing yourself. And criminals are no different than us. They have a job to do, and they're trying to make their job more efficient. And AI is just another tool. It's like asking a carpenter if they want to use power tools or hand tools. And the answer is, I'll use it depending on what's going to make my job more efficient. So just like you and I might use, I don't know, Excel to do math, they're using AI and ML to do crime. And so some of the more ambitious are using LLMs to do things like security research. So they might say, hey, I'm going to teach it how to do vulnerability scanning, and not just off of known things, but it's like a super or a semi-intelligent fuzzer almost.
Yes.
And the difference here is the democratization of these tools, because this is something that literally anyone with a computer from the last 10 years and a stable internet connection, they can do this. So while anyone can, I expect, honestly, the nation states are going to start with it because they've got the better funding and they can direct their folks and so on and so forth, right? But as white hat hackers create their own to do the exact same thing, but for a different purpose, and start sharing them, I would be on the lookout for more 0 days courtesy of AI. But for now, though, social engineering, like we talked about, vishing, smishing, all that stuff, are where the sweet spot's at. It's because you can just use an LLM to generate it for you. You don't have to do a whole lot of work, especially if they're using real-time voice and video cloning, because then they can pose as like your chief financial officer or whoever you want over a phone call or over a video call. And especially if they're a couple of levels separated from you, chances are you won't have any reason to think it's not them, other than the fact that you've never talked to them before and you're wondering why they're calling you. Freely available or low price tools can let almost anybody do this. So like we talked about, verification of who's on the other end of a video or a phone call is going to be important, or an email, right? Which is going to make things like video and phone job interviews much more interesting, because how do you know that it's actually whoever the applicant is, or vice versa? How do you know that it's actually Boeing doing the interview and not somebody else? Do you remember that old show from like the 90s called Alias with like Jennifer Gardner or somebody in it? She thought she was working for the CIA for years, but it turns out she was working for somebody else against the CIA.
Right.
And this is basically that. So other issues I'd expect to see is, again, nation states first and rest of the world later, not just automated vulnerability discovery, but having the entire attack chain automated, like from target recon to victim selection to social engineering of specific people using their personal phones, emails, and information. Like we talked about, perhaps via AI compromised legitimate accounts so that you can get it from a legit source, to exploit development that's targeted directly at what that user is using. So, hey, I'm running, random email server. Cool. I will custom engineer my own exploit just for that one because I'll have an AI do it. Then after exploit, it's privilege escalation and lateral movement and info harvesting and or attack and ransomware delivery. All this can be given to an AI to do. It just requires people to actually do it. I have no desire to watch the world burn, so I'm not building something like that. But so you're probably going to ask, so what are you going to do when you have AIs that may not be able to pass the Turing test, but can pass the employee smell test?
Right.
Like we talked about, you get them to verify through other channels, out of band communication. If the CFO is all like, transfer $500 million now, the appropriate response is, sure thing. Send me a digitally signed email so that we've got a paper trail of it. Or let me call you back. The line is breaking up. It's not airtight, because if it's arms versus armor. I built thicker armor. Someone's going to build a bigger bullet. They build a bigger bullet. I'm going to make thicker armor.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm hearing that the educating our employees will be a key element. And you spoke a lot about the MITRE initial access, execution, persistence, and then privilege execution, and so on. You spoke about that chain, but one of the things I think that more and more of us are getting to be aware of is that most of these hackers are already inside our system. They are probably sitting there and sort of scanning the network, building, kind of understanding our architecture and so on and so forth. What do we do? I mean, essentially, with that knowledge that a lot of them are already, kind of already got access to us. and they are working on escalating privileges. How do we mitigate all this, and how do we deal with it, knowing that the enemy is within, at this point in time?
Yeah, you're right. It's not enemy at the gates, it's enemy inside the gates, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, like I mentioned before, the only advantage that the attackers have is going undetected, because as soon as they're detected, game's up. You got someone in the marketplace that's trying to sell you something, and as soon as you figure out that they're selling you something that's a counterfeit good, you know, and they know that you're no longer interested. Similarly, it's about forcing the attackers to get detected. So really your question is, how do we more quickly and more reliably detect attackers in our network? And I'm glad you
right.
brought up the MITRE ATT&CK framework, because at the end of the day, we're doing attack tree pruning. It's all about figuring out where in your specific network is the greatest return on investment. Because yes, you can implement all the controls that you want, but we don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't have the personnel, not only to implement, but to maintain it in a way that we would like, that also allows for our operations to complete in the way and time and at cost that we're interested in. So it's a risk reward balance, right? So by looking at the MITRE ATT&CK framework and doing some attack tree pruning, you can start forcing the attackers into out into the open, where they get discovered, and you can remove them from the network.
Okay.
So it's all about putting tripwires. Like you've seen those movies where you got someone who's out camping and they've got the strings with the tin cans and whatnot on there. Putting more of those, but not just at like ankle level, but in the trees and everywhere else, and potentially further out, so that they can self-identify themselves sooner, and you can escort them out the door.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you
Sorry.
something else to say?
So these alerts help to reveal the attackers, and of course, alert fatigue is a real thing. So doing what you can to help minimize the number of alerts, especially false positives, is absolutely crucial. As you mentioned at the beginning, I'm the lead security researcher on a security product that can help with this, and I'm not doing a sales pitch. I'm just telling you what our implementation is. We're using a thing called Shepherd at the Universal Strategy Group, and the Department of Defense was doing monitoring of our networks for us. And in July of 2022, we were at about 1 million attacks per month, is what they were telling us. That's independent government source data. We installed Shepherd on our network, and since then, our attack rate has been 0, as in we have had no attacks.
Wow.
Because our networks can't be found. We're doing the attack tree pruning. If you can't find us, you can't strike us, right? And since then, as far as internal alerts, you can imagine how our internal alert level has gone from really high to almost nothing. We've had, since that, in the last year, we have had one internal alert, and it was something that looked a little bit weird on one of our laptops. And because we have implemented a good backup strategy, we just said, cool, wipe and reload, done. And we watched for that to reoccur, and it hasn't reoccurred since. So either the attacker is really good and they deserve to be in there, or it was nothing, or it was something and it's gone.
Okay. And you're speaking of Shepherd. I mean, I think Shepherd is just being launched in Malaysia. Maybe we'll just take a quick 30-second break and have a quick look at what Shepherd is, and then maybe we can talk a little bit more about this. So here's a quick a preview of Shepherd. So I want to jump into this bit. I think we got a couple more minutes. Shepherd, I mean, you did a lot of testing on Shepherd. You kind of looked at it. Why is it? I mean, I've heard numerous people tell me it's groundbreaking, it's amazing, it's this. But tell me what's so great about Shepherd, and why it potentially would be a huge technology to be implemented to stop a lot of cybercrime.
Well, so what it really is, it is, in my opinion, it's how networking really should have been from the beginning. The way that networking actually ended up being when ARPANET first happened, right?
Mm,
It was built essentially the same way the phone system is, and it has the same inherent weaknesses as um, as the postal system, as our ears, as SMS, and the telephone system does.
mm,
And that inherent weakness is it's on the receiver to decide if an incoming message, signal, etc., is actually good and valid or is garbage. And
mm,
so in this case, what Shepard does is says, you know what? That's not okay. It's inside of our domain here. We really only need the stuff that is authenticated. So let's only do that. And so you could think about it as a much easier way, and it doesn't use this technology, but just for ease of discussion, you could think about it like an easy way to set up IPsec tunnels on the fly. But it's not controlled by the person who's initiating the connection, and it's not controlled by the thing receiving the connection. There's a central administrative server in the center that can be clustered, and it can live in the cloud, and it can live on-prem, that does all that authentication. And it's the one that does the connecting between different devices. And one of the cool things about it is that it doesn't strive to be an identity management platform. It'll integrate with SAML 2.0 or OpenID or an on-prem Active Directory. It has one built in as well. It's not going to be as robust as those, where people have spent millions of work hours putting them together, and probably many more millions of dollars. But it integrates with those so that you don't have to get rid of whatever your identity management system is. And it's set up so that you can run the clients at on some really light hardware. So I have it running inside of some containers right now, some little Docker containers that consume almost no resources, but they still do their job. And what else is cool about it is a lot of folks. I was concerned about this myself when I first started using it. I was like, hey, isn't this going to increase latency?
mm,
And I ran a test on my home network here,
mm.
and the test was, hey, I've got 30 frames a second of video running, and over remote desktop, and I was pushing the 30 FPS over remote desktop just on my local LAN here, and I averaged about 36 frames a second.
Wow.
Actually coming over normal TCP based remote desktop. Then I pushed it over UDP using just my local network, no Shepherd, no nothing, just normal, and that averaged around 26 frames a second. And then I said, cool, let's do this over Shepherd. So I did the exact same thing as the TCP one, but it actually left my home network. It went out to Azure, got over its TLS 1.3 connection, got
Right.
decrypted, got re-encrypted with a new key, and sent back to my home network to another machine. And instead of the 36 frames a second that we got on average with normal TCP, I only got 35, which actually outperformed the UDP on my local network with
Yeah.
no.
Right. Right. Incredible.
If I hadn't done the test myself, I wouldn't believe me.
Wow. So very little latency. I mean, that's almost negligible, right?
Mhm.
Essentially. I think, I mean, the other thing that, one of the things I guess with Shepherd, my understanding of it is that at some point in time, things like VPN, because I mean, this here you have a point-to-point authenticator, right? Things like VPN potentially may not be necessary, right? I mean, that's kind of a big funnel coming into a one piece, right? Is that where it's going to happen? I mean, it's things like Shepherd or technology such as this going to replace things like VPN and other sort of old ways of networking?
I hope so, and that not just because I'm a chef aficionado, but because we're seeing security infrastructure being the focus of attacks now. Like how many different security apparatus have been the means of infiltration for bad guys over the past 6 months. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Especially, they love VPN boxes, the VPN concentrators, or the old like RAS concentrators. Man, those are great
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if you're a bad guy.
So absolutely. So, one of the things, we've got about a minute to go. We always do what we call a fire round here, where we ask you quick questions. You have to answer in like 10 seconds or 15
You got it.
seconds. So I'm going to give you 5 since we don't have too much time. But number one, if you could change something in the world, what would you change?
The way that networking was built, and build it the right way.
Perfect. What's your favorite non-tech related topic?
Star Wars.
Okay. What is the one business show, podcast, book that you would recommend to aspiring entrepreneurs?
How to measure anything.
How to measure it. Perfect. What is your favorite way to unwind?
Oh, games. Easy.
Okay. And imagine if you have a time machine and you were giving advice to a younger self, what golden nugget would you share?
Invest in NVIDIA.
Love it. All right. And the last one, if you could have a superpower related to business, what would it be?
The ability to be able to clearly articulate complex technical topics to audiences who have neither the time nor the inclination to understand those topics, but are the decision makers, and to do it in a way that helps them to appreciate what it is without having to be technical.
I love it. Thanks, everyone. Data, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on our show. We've been talking a little bit about cybersecurity and how criminals sort of penetrate AI. And then we ended the show with talking about Shepherd. You can check it out. It's a technology that's just available in Asia. It's through Cyber Armor, a subsidiary of Full Armor. You can check it out here at cyberarmor.asia. Data, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been fantastic. And we look forward to having you in Malaysia. I think upcoming in a number of months, I think somewhere early next year, there's going to be a big cybersecurity conference. And we're hoping that Data will be able to be here in person and enlighten us and spend a little bit more time giving us deep insights on the cybersecurity. But Data, thank you so much. We've been on Tech Talk Friday. We'll see you next Friday, same time, same place. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Roshan.
Thank you.